USCHO.com.
Welcome to USCHO Edge for Friday, October 13th, 2023. I'm Ed Trefzger with Jim Connelly and Dan Rubin. It's our podcast talking about the odds going into some of the top games of the weekend and a little bit about why they pick the numbers that they do. So why don't we jump in? Brand new season, episode number 1. Early games, a lot is not known yet, but everybody seems to know that Boston University is the number 1 team in the country. They're minus 350 as they travel up to New Hampshire, which is a plus 280. The over-under on this game is 5.5. And maybe before we dive into the details on this game, if you can just explain what minus and plus mean on those and what the over-under means, and then we can roll on from there.
Yeah, let's do the re-education for those who might have missed the episodes last year. Okay, so if we are talking about odds on a game, one team is going to be the favorite. And when you look at the money line, and that's the way we're always going to talk about games here, is on the money line. We don't do puck line, which is adding in the plus 1.5 goals, minus 1.5 goals. Those are too complicated for us. We're going to go straight. Who wins the game? Who loses the game? It doesn't take into account just regulation. This is overtime, and shootouts are included in all of this stuff. So if your team wins in any way, doesn't matter how they win, it's graded as a win. So Boston University, if you bet $350 on Boston University, you would win $100. So that's how much of a favorite BU is in this game. You would have to bet $350 on BU just to win $100 back. Now you can get the original $350 back, so your $350 turns into $450. Low odds on that. On New Hampshire, on the other side, if you bet $100 because they are considered plus 280, New Hampshire $100 would make you 280. So if you bet $100 on New Hampshire, you would take $380 back. And that's betting through an app, as most people are nowadays. If you bet through somebody that just says, hey, call in your bet, they never require you to give you the money until you owe them, then the numbers are true numbers. Then you get the 350 or whatever. You get the money back, the 100 back, or you get 280 back as your profit. The over-under is a little bit more complicated. Most of the times it is 110 on either side. If you bet 110 on the over, then you would get $100 back. You bet 110 on the under, you get $100 back. Right now, we're seeing sports books actually go the other way, and they're saying, okay, we're going to give you over under 5.5 on every game, but the games we think are going to go over, we're going to make them minus 175. So you have to bet 175 to get the 100 back. I think over under at this point in the season is a little dicey to go with unless you really have a good feeling about the teams. But you're going to get some weird odds. I hope that explains the odds a little bit better than the average person understands it at this point. There's a ton of other bets that are out there that you can make depending on the sports book, but these are the basic bets that you can make on college hockey right now.
Yeah, and just to throw in there too, when we talk about these, you'll hear us use some terms that when it comes to that maybe the bet, if you're trying to win money, isn't necessarily the odds on favorite bet. Like if you're looking at a team like Boston University and you really think Boston University is going to win that game, we'll talk about staying away from some of these bets unless it's just when we talk about parlays or something like that, like throwing multiple bets together. So we may take a very heavy favorite like a Boston University who's a minus 350 and add it with someone who's an underdog who's got a plus value that we think is going to win. And on your app, that's going to change some of the values that it may be combined because you'll have to hit both of them at the same time. So when we use terms like that, like parlays, if you're parlaying a bet, you're literally combining 2 games into one bet. You would have to hit them both. So if you're parlaying to a money line and an over-under, you would have to hit them both in order to win your bet. So we'll go into some of this stuff and you'll hear us use these terms. So if right away, if you look at it, there are options to look at it and say, well, minus 350, I don't want to touch this team. But we'll give you ways of which, if you still want to play it because you're a huge fan of that team and you don't live in the state of Massachusetts because you can't bet Massachusetts college teams in the state of Massachusetts. We'll find ways for you to pair everything together, right, Jim?
We always find a way. It's how confusing it can become for the average.
Exactly.
For the younger, let's call it the virgin gamblers out there. There are a lot of people that, believe it or not, still, despite how big sports betting has become in the U.S., haven't placed any bets in their life at this point. We're trying to explain all that a little bit for you.
And also when we talk about it, we usually are just talking about monopoly money too for us, just because
Don't think that I'm throwing down money on these games. I don't bet any college hockey games at all. I make my money on cricket. So let's just know, if I'm talking about where I'm going, college hockey is not the place I'm betting.
So I know this is just an audio podcast, but in the theater of the mind, you can either picture Dan and Jim hunched over the end of an Irish bar with a racing form in their hand, or wearing flamboyant double-breasted suits out on the streets of New York City and singing, I've Got a Horse Right Here. His name is Paul Revere. You can imagine either one of those.
I'm really old right there, Ed.
Yeah, and I normally record in my garage, and I'm in the garage right now, so I don't think I'm wearing a double-breasted suit anytime soon. I'm in the Rubin broadcasting studio, and there's a rake behind me that no one can see because we're recording. I got a rake, I got a snowblower, I got a shovel, I got a piece of plywood that I'm not even sure where it's from. So this is really high-tech sports books that we're talking about here.
He certainly does not have a horse in back of him.
No.
And I was going to say you were looking a bit rakish, but anyway.
Hey, we're off and running.
Let's get back to it. Number one, Boston University. A huge favorite, minus 350 to plus 280 as they head up to the Wit to play New Hampshire. Nothing surprising about this one, I don't think.
I don't think the line surprises you. I think whether you want to bet on this would be the most surprising thing to me. I wouldn't touch this game. BU probably should win this game. They likely will. I think the last time that UNH beat BU was 2015. It's almost a decade, not a full decade, but it's getting close to a decade. Last year, I go back. I think I called one of these games at the Whittemore Center last year. BU took a 2-0 lead. UNH tied it up. BU took a 3-2 lead. UNH tied it up. But I think the final score was 6-3. BU. Because that's what they do. All that said, you're laying very high dollars to win very little. Does New Hampshire feel like a nice value bet? I expect more out of UNH this year than I did a season ago. I think they're an older team. I think they're a little bit more seasoned. Some of their more talented players like Cy Leclerc are he's a sophomore now. He had a fantastic rookie campaign that nobody noticed because there were guys like Lane Hudson and Cutter Gauthier and Matt Wood all in Hockey East. And you kind of lost Leclerc and what he had as a season, especially his first half. So I would stay away. This is not a game that I could bet. If you have some pizza money, as I call it, and you want to just try to maybe turn $10 into 38. Throw it down on New Hampshire, but it's hard. This might be a tough one to find too. This is not a line that I found out there. This was one that I kind of had to generate based on some experience. I did not find this at DraftKings. I know it exists out there somewhere, and it's probably somewhere around 350 plus 280. But this might be a hard bet to even find. Over under a 5.5. Somehow I like the over in this one, even though BU played a 3-2 game last week against Bentley, even though UNH played a 3-2 game against Maine. I still like the over in this game. I feel like there's going to be some goals.
The people who are listening to this will, anytime there's a home, I live by a couple of rules. One is home dogs. I hate betting against home dogs. I just don't like it. It's not something I ever feel good about because I think home ice advantage on an opening night at a place like UNH, which is historically hockey mad, and an arena that's great, great home ice advantage up there. And if you've never been to UNH, the rink is a different size. It's an Olympic ice sheet, which is
it's not anymore.
It's not anymore. Oh well, then scratch that. I don't even want Ed to edit that part. I want that part in there so I can look stupid. But I usually go, if I see a big plus number on a home team, I'm liable to go after that. So in a situation like this, if you're like Jimmy says, if there's a pizza money bet, I'm throwing it down on UNH. I wouldn't bet BU on this unless you're doing, like I was saying earlier, pairing it with a parlay bet and something that you feel really confident on an underdog, like one of the games that we'll get to in a little bit. Then you can pair it and you can actually bring your odds on BU a little bit better. But you have to hit both of those. The one thing I would throw out here is that it's early in the season, so teams are going to find different combinations at this point. There are going to be some things that maybe didn't work for BU last week that they have to make some changes on. I actually had a front row seat to that game, BU Bentley, and I honestly wasn't overly impressed with BU's defense. I just didn't feel like it was. There were holes and there were golden opportunities that they gave up over the course of a 3-period game. I also think Bentley was throwing the kitchen sink at them. So after they were down 2-0, so that's another thing to kind of just mention. I also think home opener, like I said, for UNH, there is a road there where I like UNH. But I mean, for the odds and what you're going to look at when you have a team that's, lost 12 in a row dating back to 2015, sometimes looking at the fantasy land story isn't always the smart bet. Sometimes you just have to look at it and say, they haven't won a game in a while in this matchup, so you can't take it till it happens. I do agree with you though on over/under. This series, I think, has gone to overtime a lot since 2015, maybe 4 or 5 times. Even if you go back to when they were in the postseason, those double overtime games, there are going to be goals scored. I think offenses usually take over anyway in the first part of the season. So 5.5, I could picture this being a 4-2 game, and boom, you hit it. So that's what you're kind of looking at.
Last year, you had 6-3 in game 1, 3-0 in game 2. So
yeah,
you pretty much split the middle with 5.5.
Yeah.
The next one on our list has some interesting storylines around it. Wisconsin -115 at Bemidji -115. So a toss up. Over under on all the games today is 5.5. What a history in recent years with that. Wisconsin had what was seeming to be a storybook season ended in 2021 at the hands of Bemidji in the first round of the NCAA playoffs. Cole Caulfield turned pro with Montreal after that series. Meanwhile, the following year, the controversial overtime win for Minnesota State when current Badger head coach Mike Hastings was behind the Mavericks bench. Hastings and Tommy Serratori, the head coach of Bemidji State, know each other well. They know their tendencies. They know how they like to play. This one, a toss-up on the road. What do you see in this one, guys?
I think this, you kind of just laid out, I think the second reason becomes more interesting here. The fact that Mike Hastings, first-year coach at Wisconsin, knows more about Bemidji State than maybe Tom Serratori knows about his team. I mean, when you've played this many times in this many big games, you've studied so much film on Bemidji State. You honestly know every one of their tendencies. It's still a new year. It's a new team and all of that. But this is a very interesting pairing. This is set long before Mike Hastings gets to Wisconsin. This is something that's been in the works, but I think that the line makers get this right. Make it an even money. Call it. Technically, you're slightly favoring Wisconsin just because they're on the road, and it's they're both -115. There's something about this I like Bemidji. This familiarity, but I could see either side of this one. And Wisconsin obviously did not give up a goal last weekend. Different team though, Augustana. I think that this is one where I don't mind thinking that the home team could win here. Over under, I like the under. I think that these two teams are going to play a low scoring game. This could be a 2-1, 3-1, 3-2 type of game. I mean, could you be at 3-2 and waiting for an empty net or something like that for certain? And an empty net could break some hearts, but I go Bemidji in the under here.
When people listen to us, I'm a big fan of Mike Hastings. I loved what he did at Minnesota State. I think last weekend's showing for them against Augustana. Yes, Augustana is a new program. that had never set foot on the ice before. Taking a pair of shutout wins, I think, is a big step. You know, anytime you're a new coach and anytime you have a new program and anytime you have a program that's trying to find the way back, that helps. And part of what makes this matchup compelling to me is the fact that if you go back last year, and for newcomers to college hockey, Minnesota State was destroying teams under Mike Hastings for the better part of 5 years. We'll go 4 or 5 years. They got swept last year at Bemidji. They lost. They got swept at home. I mean, they split and lost an overtime game at Bemidji. So 3 out of 4 games last year went to Bemidji. Bemidji historically plays good defense. Mike Hastings' style is built on defense. I wouldn't touch this one, but I would take the under. Don't know that I would take this as a matchup. I think there's so much in these early games that the odds make it so hard to pick. Putting something on paper and saying, all right, Dan, but you have to make a choice. I would probably take Wisconsin just because Wisconsin has played 2 games and, there's a little bit of, what do I like to say? Scar tissue from 2 games, even no matter whether you win them big or not. Bemidji played Minnesota in an exhibition. Doesn't really count to me. It doesn't get the same type of scar tissue. So if you're thinking of throwing down, I would probably say Wisconsin in the under. But don't, like you said, these are 2 coaches that know each other, and this is probably the home pick 'em that we're very much in on.
So there are a couple of things I want to bring up in this. There are also quite a few players from Minnesota State that made the trip over to Madison with Mike Hastings. So there's some familiarity there. We remember Hastings at Minnesota State, 4 years of Dryden, McKay, and net, who had lofty numbers, but also didn't see a lot of shots on net. Could he have found somebody like that in Kyle McClellan, who had a disappointing season last year at Wisconsin after transferring from Mercyhurst? He's the first goalie at Wisconsin ever to get shutouts in consecutive nights against the same team. And that's a long history. Maybe he's the goalie to build a stingy defense in front of.
I think part of it, I think part of it's the system. The system goalies do very well, and that's one of those things that as you start to see Wisconsin, and if you watch some of those minutes from last week against Augustana, the system matters, and Mike Hastings' system is built on making sure not a lot of shots get through. We've seen plenty of goaltenders over the years have great numbers and not win because the defense has just decided to clear out and see if they could and let the goalie bail them out. The goal in a Mike Hastings defense was to not let the goalie see many shots, and if he was seeing the shots, see them from outside. So that is something that happened last week. I think Bemidji is more talented than an expansion team. That's no disrespect to Augustana by any stretch. What they're doing up there in Sioux Falls is great, and I support it and I love it, and I'm very much for them. But Bemidji is much more entrenched in what they've done. I just think that when we come to a goaltender situation like Kyle McClellan, you're looking at a team that is learning how to play in front of him as opposed to a team that needs to rely on him.
Yeah, I would just say you kind of stole my thunder there a little bit, Dan, because I would say that the system in front of you makes you the goaltender so often. And I'm sure that McClellan's a heck of a goaltender, but I also know that Mike Hastings has limited team shots no matter who he's facing and no matter where he is. Even back to the USHL days, he was not a team that gave up a ton of shots. So I think that you're kind of hitting the nail on the head there, Dan, that you might not see a ton of shots, and that could make the goaltender even much better than his numbers might suggest.
Well, we've got 3 more to look at. We'll do that when we return with USCHO Edge. Continuing now with USCHO Edge, I'm Ed Trefzger with Jim Connelly and Dan Rubin. Number 18 Penn State making a few road trips in the non-conference season this year. This will be the second and third games of their road trip. They're going to take on Clarkson and St. Lawrence in New York State's North Country. Number 18 Penn State, minus 210 at a plus 160 Clarkson. Over under again is 5.5.
This is one where I really like the home team. I know Dan said he hates going against home dogs. I really like Clarkson here, and that's no disrespect to Guy Godowski and Penn State. This is not a team that plays a lot of non-conference road games. So to start their year with 3 in a row, I don't know if they have any for the rest of the year. I'm pretty sure that they don't. But they're starting 3 on the road, started at LIU. Now Clarkson, St. Lawrence. I don't know. And this is the one that I think is the one I would have circled of those 3 and say this could be a game that Penn State could fall. The reason being is that Clarkson, I think, is highly undervalued in the ECAC this year. It's so easy to talk about Quinnipiac. It's so easy to talk about Cornell, even Harvard. I think Clarkson and Casey Jones has a fantastic team this year. So when you look at plus 160, I want to go back to Dan's point earlier about the parlay. If you were to parlay, and what parlay means is you make basically 2 bets at once. If you were to say lay $100 on Boston University at 350 and Clarkson at 160, they both win. You take the money from each and you basically parlay them in. So you're getting some value from each bet. The final result of that would be $100 would make $234 or so on a typical parlay. That's pretty good money when you think of having a massive favorite in BU that we don't really know what any other way to bet, and you lay with a Clarkson. That's, I think, should be a home favorite in this game, and they're plus 160 on DraftKings. Love that bet. It's going to be hard to find that one. As I mentioned, that BU line not available everywhere. But if you can find that one, I like it. And then the over under 5.5 again. This is one I would definitely say would go over. Penn State loves to shoot the puck. Pucks are going to go in. Clarkson doesn't mind shooting the puck. Pucks are going to go in. I see this like a 4-2, 5-2, 5-3, 4-3, somewhere in that range. But I like Clarkson in this one.
I love Clarkson. I love Clarkson in general as a program. I love Casey Jones. What happened last year, if you're looking straight at last year, I mean, like, well, Clarkson, Dan, finished in 6th in the conference, or it was 6th place in ECAC. How can you say that you love them? Last year, they were a favorite. And last year, I had them pegged to win the league and unseat Quinnipiac and do all the things that Clarkson should have done over the 4 years prior. To give you an idea of how good Clarkson has been over the last 5 years, they have done everything humanly possible except win an NCAA tournament game because the gods just didn't see fit to have a tournament game. Like 1920 tournament gets canceled. They were going to the tournament that year. 2021, they were in that weird COVID year when you only had the 4 teams. They would have gone to the tournament. Instead, their postseason gets canceled. This is a team that just, I think last 21-22, they were dominant in the second half, and then they lose out based on the math that keeps them out. I think they were the last team out of the NCAA tournament with the pairwise rankings, or if not close to it. Last year, the roof fell in. I mean, it's as simple as that. They were under 500. They finished 6th in the league, but this is still a core that has done almost everything except win an NCAA tournament game. And that is a lofty expectation that I think, all right, this damaged them a little bit last year. They're coming out hungry. They split with Notre Dame last week. They're hungry. They're healthy. They're fired up. And that is a team that has something to prove with the talent to prove it. I think they could do it. And I wouldn't bet against them as a home underdog at Shield. Ooh, wait, that's some good home ice advantage there. I'd hammer the over, but that place is going to be, the train horn is going to be blowing in Potsdam.
Number 10, St. Cloud. Brent Larson takes his Huskies at -110 in to see Minnesota State. Luke Strand's first season behind the bench. They're -120, so very close odds over and under. Again, 5.5.
Yeah, I'm kind of interested in the St. Cloud line at -110. I thought they should have probably been a heavier favorite. Maybe the bookmakers look a little bit at the fact that they struggle a little bit with St. Thomas, but I think that St. Thomas is going to make a lot of teams struggle this year. Rico Blasi's done a fantastic job with that team, and I think that St. Cloud's getting into their own. They'll come into it. This is a good team. Brett Larson has not had a bad team since he's been the head coach there. I think that they probably should have been a little heavier favorite. Luke Strand, I don't know what to expect from him. Met him in April at the coaches convention. Seemed like a great guy, but I also know that he has a lot of holes to fill in that lineup. That from guys that transferred out went with Mike Hastings. So I actually thought that St. Cloud should have been the favorite here. Technically, I guess when you're looking at -110, -120, there's no real favorite. But I thought that you could have honestly had this closer to like St. Cloud at -180, -175, in Minnesota State closer to +135. So I'd have to favor St. Cloud here. Listen, the two teams we're talking about here, despite the fact that St. Cloud played a 5-4 game last week, when I think about St. Cloud and Minnesota State, I think about great defense and great goaltending. So I think the goal should be low. I would stay away from the over/under. If I had to bet it, I'd shade the under. But I like St. Cloud here.
I look at last year. St. Cloud and Minnesota State played a pair of 1-goal games, so that should tell you almost everything that you'd want to know about this. Of course, they hit 5 in the first game. They hit 7 in the second. 3-2, 4-3 losses that were for Minnesota State. That were wins by St. Cloud. I think there's a lot of respect in the odds for Minnesota State as history in what they've done, which we were just talking about with Wisconsin. Mankato is just a great hockey town, and they have great fans there. But I think you're right. I think if Minnesota State had a plus sign next to them, I'd go back to my home dog theory. I'm not really there with -120. I think this is going to be under, which means it's going to be an 8-6 shootout, and it's going to hit the over in the first period, because I never hit over-unders. That's just, as you listen to this, you'll realize that I know that every time I say it's going under, it's hitting the over. So I say St. Cloud. Plus, I think St. Cloud, that last weekend didn't feel like St. Cloud. Even the 1-0 win was nice, but I don't think that they're as I don't want to say as bad as they looked, because they didn't look bad. They just struggled. Like you said, St. Thomas is going to make a lot of teams struggle. I'm not there in saying St. Cloud's going to lose a game to Minnesota State this weekend.
Our final game on the list has Northern Michigan, Grant Potulny's Wildcats at +170, visiting number 17 Minnesota Duluth, a -220. Scott Sandlin in his 24th season behind the Bulldogs bench. The over/under is 5.5.
If we played this game around Halloween or sometime in late October, early November, and I had these numbers, I'd take Northern, no doubt. I don't like the fact that they haven't played yet. No exhibition games last weekend. Didn't play a game yet. I know that Minnesota Duluth only played what I believe the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame game was considered an exhibition game against Tech. So I kind of look at this and say, I wish Northern played before they had to hit the road and go to Duluth. I like Duluth at home. They're a pretty strong team. I think this is going to be one of Scotty's better teams, talking to him and what he has in there this year. But Grant Potulny's teams have surprised us a ton. This is not one I would definitely stay away from, like that BU game. But if I had to bet here, I'd take the favorite at home, -220. Not a lot of value there, but again, you throw it into a parlay. Hey, throw that one and Clarkson together. That's pretty good money. You're talking almost $300+ on a 2-team parlay if they both hit. So I'd go Duluth here. Over under. I always was saying, hey, take Duluth on the under, take Duluth on the under, take Duluth on the under. Not in recent years. Take Duluth on the over. If you got to go over, this is going to be 6, 7, 8 goals in this game.
I wish this were played. If we could just like let the outdoors in a little bit in Duluth, because it's going to be 50 degrees out and gorgeous this weekend. When I say gorgeous, it's going to be cloudy. You're going to maybe some rain on Friday, because next week Northern Michigan goes to Arizona State, and I don't do well in desert heat. So if I were, I'd be more of a Duluth 50 degrees and cloudy guy. But I'm taking Northern Michigan, and specifically because the same reason, like I said last about Minnesota State, when they have, if I had seen Minnesota State as a odds-on underdog, I would take them. I feel the same way about Northern Michigan at +170. They haven't played yes, I like Minnesota Duluth. I think there's an element to early games also where Minnesota Duluth is much more well-known in terms of brand, in terms of commodity, in terms of roster. People, the odds makers might have looked at them and seen them. Northern Michigan, you're kind of looking at them and saying, who? And if you're a casual college hockey fan, and I say this with no disrespect to the Upper Peninsula, you don't know anything about Northern Michigan. You don't know where you barely. I mean, if you're a casual college hockey observer diving in for the first time, you're used to seeing a Minnesota Duluth or a Minnesota or a Michigan or some of those bigger college hockey brands from the Midwest, the North Dakotas. You're looking at Northern Michigan and you're not really sure. You're saying, no, there's no way a Northern Michigan can step on the ice with a Minnesota Duluth. And I think that's where the odds get skewed a little bit. I'm not saying that to fire up Northern Michigan fans or anything like that, but I think that skews the odds away from where they might need to be. And for that reason, I would say, Northern Michigan. This is one of those early season games where I think if this were played at the end of October, early November, I wouldn't like an over on 5.5, but I feel like first game of the season, this is one of those that's just going to hit the over because we're at the beginning of the season. Even though Northern Michigan usually doesn't hit the over, I'm going with an over here.
Here's the one thing I'm going to put in there. If it goes over, Duluth wins. If it goes under, Northern wins. That's my feeling on this one. I see Northern winning a 3-1, 2-1 game. I see Minnesota Duluth winning a 4-2, 5-2, 6-3 type of game. And especially in that building where when they put one in, sometimes they can put four in because the crowd can get behind them. I don't know what type of early season crowd they'll get, but that building can get loud. And I've been out there for their opening series. I was there. I called a game after they won one of their national championships, banner raising night. And guess what? They lost 2-1. And that's the type of game that you can see played against them. The next night they won 4-2. So I look at the more goals that are scored, the more it favors Duluth.
I will say home ice in Duluth is a very real thing. Soil is cramped. It's not cramped, which is to say, you're shoulder to shoulder with the person next to you. But it's one of those places where the fans are definitely on the ice a little bit more. And it is that place, if it gets loud, it's a very hard place to play. And I think that is a different atmosphere than a lot of places that are a little more cozy and a little more expansive. I still, like I said, I like Northern. I like Northern in this game. I feel that they can play in the cramped environment. Barrie Event Center is a little cramped to itself too, but it's not like AmSoil. AmSoil was built to put fans on top of everything.
Well, Dan, all I've got to say is even if you don't want to go to Arizona in the middle of October, if NMU is at ASU in January, I would say go. Believe me. 70s, low 80s, you got
give me that time I walked out of an arena with windburn any day of the week. People who are listening to this saying, what's wrong with this guy? I'm like an offensive lineman in football. There's no such thing as too cold for me. It doesn't exist. There's no such thing as too cold.
Okay. That's why you miss the John A. Ryan skating arena.
You got me there. I actually do miss it. I love that place. Best pizza in college hockey, man.
Well, we're going to wrap it up right there with this edition of USCHO Edge. We'll be back next week to look at betting lines and odds. For Jim Connelly and for Dan Rubin, I'm Ed Trefzger.